All right, there we go. We are now live. But of course, most people are watching this in the archive, Keely, because you and I are throwing this together at the, not the last minute. Look, these are conversations we've been having for a while that I've been really interested in. So, and I'm always excited to talk to my colleagues as well. Isn't it quite rare that actually as colleagues, we rarely get to have one-on-one? Isn't that funny?
It certainly
you know
is.
What I mean? Yeah, so you really get to know, especially like head office folks that I rarely see since, we don't travel as much anymore. It's been wonderful to do that. So this is cool. So this is sort of a getting to know you, but of course we've got a theme, which is, cyber insurance, cyber law, but insurance and how to measure risk. So let's do this. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of it, because I think, what we'll do is we'll carve this up later and we'll put who we both are in the description so we can avoid having to waste a few seconds with that. So let me see if I can describe the problem, the challenge rather, that you are attempting to solve, and then you tell me if I'm getting it right. And if I am, then I know we're on the same wavelength. Okay. And this is why I'm deeply interested in what you're doing. Okay. So if you think about, we're going to tackle the problem of cyber insurance and how to actually measure cyber risk financially, both from an insurance perspective, but mostly, and I think actually for our conversation, I think this is true, from our customer's perspective, it is the most important to understand how to measure that risk, or rather how to put that risk in financial measurement terms. And I think it's because of this, Keely. So you tell me if this is right. So if you think, we've had the internet for about 30 years. And at first we're just sharing academic documents and stuff back then. And then industry was birthed and we had this whole thing. And so fairly quickly, threat actors got ideas to steal money, ultimately, at the end of the day, cause disruption, but mostly to steal money. And so industries were birthed. Now, industries that were birthed were technologists. And certainly some of these technologists, certainly our boss, for example, Gil Schwed, having given birth to the actual network security industry, would have foreseen, certainly, obviously, have foreseen the threat actors. I mean, there's military background there, and certainly TCP over IP was actually invented by DARPA. So these folks would have known there was a threat coming and would have certainly, and here we are working at a company that's now 30 years pushing back threat actors. But what we haven't, or at least what I haven't been able to understand or hear until you started dancing around this topic a few months ago, or at least I got involved in the conversation with you a few months ago, was how do we therefore, so the industry grows up and matures, and therefore there's such a disruption to business beyond an outage. So we're not talking about the department of the CIO and are the machines actually on. That's kind of like insuring for the weather, I think. I think the problem we've solved with mathematicians and meteorologists insuring for the weather, the risk over a 200-year pattern, let's say, and whether the lights are on in a building is actually a more quantifiable risk for those insurance companies. But cybersecurity is really interesting for us because there are actually people actively trying to create bad weather every moment of every day. And so the insurance company is actually dealing with something that I think is new. And we, let's say the technologists on our side representing the customers, not that we are representing them in this conversation, let's say, but we certainly make products for them. So we lean in that direction, I think, on how to help them with this conversation. So now the insurance companies who are at times attempting to deny cyber insurance, and this is part of the problem, Keely, I lack the vocabulary. That's right. Yeah, you're smiling on that. Exactly. And so when I talk with these folks, there's a complete mix match of vocabulary. So I really struggle at this point. And of course, you've got some education, and I think you're getting your law degree and all these kinds of things. So obviously, you're in this world and in my world too. So I think in this conversation, what you can already see is you have to bridge the gap on the terminology that we're using, and then get me to the holy grail, which I think is So the challenge that you are attempting to solve for is, how do we then show the insurance company that this organization has taken cybersecurity very seriously? Let's say, I mean, that's very flippant, actually. More than that, they've made this financial investment and they've created this kind of architectural robustness around themselves. Hey, insurance company, they deserve a better deal than an organization that just throws in a firewall and says, hell with it, right? So
Yes, that's
are we solving for that?
That's a huge question. And part of the
Right.
challenge historically is from an insurance perspective, there isn't a whole lot of historical data.
Yeah.
That, and from a security perspective or technology perspective, all of the variables keep changing. So it's
What does that mean? What are the
yeah.
variables?
So I've called cybersecurity the unsolvable math problem because the variables keep changing, because the threat landscape keeps changing, because we keep having emerging technologies and opening up new ways for bad actors and good actors to communicate, to do good things, to do bad things. So it's, to be kind of flippant, it's an unsolvable math problem because
Right.
everything's
Right.
in constant motion.
Right.
So what I've done, and I've shared out, and it's not complicated math, it's complicated logic to an extent, is try to put numbers to the problem. And going back to what I just said, it's variable. All of the parameters keep changing in the math, but the logic is fairly consistent. It's like you have this threat landscape, you have these variables, and you know what it costs. Well, you have an idea of what it costs, but it goes back to source data and how reliable is your source data, and are you comparing apples to apples or apples to oranges? So the spreadsheet that I put together,
Let's go there.
together.
Yeah,
Sure.
let's go there right away, because I think we need the visuals immediately.
And this is very high level overview.
And yeah, sure. Sorry, I've got here. I'm just going to share my. I'm going to share my screen this way. I think I got to get it that way. No, almost that one. There. Talk to this. I think this is the slide. But also, actually, before we really get into the details of this slide, this is what Keely's going to talk about.
Yes.
I think I want to establish a little bit more foundation underneath this. Like, have I articulated the problem effectively? That's the first thing, right? I mean, is this going to? How is this going to help people there?
Yes, you have articulated the problem accurately. However, there's a lot more to it. So nothing that you said was inaccurate. And I think that's part of the challenge. None of us have fully been able to describe the vastness of the challenge, because it's constant moving variables. And the value that we're about to talk about is looking at one aspect of it, which is the catch rate of a security solution. Risk mitigation, cyber risk mitigation, the value of the catch rate, because some vendors try to play it down, and I understand why, because their catch rates just aren't where they should be. But nobody's actually built out the financials.
Okay, when we're talking about things like catch rate, I know what you mean, and I think our typical audience does. Would it be helpful? Do we think that the insurance audience would also be listening to this? Because what is catch rate, right?
Sure.
Why is that an important measurement? Why did you pick on that one? Let's really get into it before we demonstrate where you went with these amazing numbers here.
Sure. So a bit of inspiration from two of our colleagues, Peter Elmer and Pete Nicoletti, in various conversations with them over the past couple of months on this topic and others. They kind of flipped a switch in the back of my head, and I'm like, and Pete Nicoletti, especially with efficacy, and that's basically the catch rate. So out of, a catch rate could be like 95%. So out of every 100 events, it's going to catch 95 of them. So the consumer the business assumes that 5% difference in risk. So the solutions is tested and stated to catch 95% of the attacks. The customer has to assume the financial risk for the other 5%.
Right, let's put that in real world terms, yeah? So let's just think of the United States as a whole country, because I think we can actually use the statistic that way, in the same way that we could knuckling down an individual organization, right? So if out of 100% of attacks, which could be ransomware, phishing, any attacks, this is where we're going with that, any cyber attack, right? The overall measurement for if you are using technology, to prevent those attacks, obviously the most important measurement is how many of those attacks does the technology catch? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yes, and that may be, and that's typically broken out into solution types. So Quantum, our firewall pillar, that I think the catch rate is 99.7%, whereas our email solution is around 98 or 99%, 99.9, depending on who you talk to and what data source they're looking at.
Sure.
But again, it goes back to data source.
But for easy math, let's say this. Okay, off the top of your head, and maybe you don't know this one, and I can just Google it on live. But does the catch rate between, let's say, the major player vendors in the cybersecurity space vary more than 5 degrees? Percent degrees?
Often.
Percent. Often, okay.
Often,
more than
yes.
10? More than 10%? I mean, I'm sure Gartner does all this and people can look it up.
Yeah, for some. And again, it depends on your source data and how the tests were done and who's giving what rating. But yeah, there's usually, depending upon the solution, there's probably 2 or 3 within a few percentage points. And then the next step down is probably a 5% differential. And then I've seen it as low as like a 30 or 40% differential.
Oh, yeah, but that's for the Mickey Mouse. Yeah.
You'd be surprised.
Ah,
but that's
really?
Wow, it's typically for an organization that is not a true security organization. They have a different line of their primary income, and they're kind of
big networking.
To say it, but they're security hobbyists, and that gear gets bundled in with their main product.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so this is what we're talking about. What we're talking about is out of 100% of attacks hitting your company, in the United States, wherever you are, the true measurement of success is, as you quoted with one of our appliances, actually at Checkpoint, Quantum Appliances, 99.7%. So you have a 0.3% chance of being attacked. Okay. So now we're starting to get a little bit of math. Now we're starting to get some hardish science, right? Like you say that, and I'm so pleased you pointed it out. Thank you, Keely, because the math is always moving. That's right. So while math is solid and accurate, right, it's always moving like the weather, but worse in our case.
Right. Okay. So the logic is consistent, but the numbers change dramatically.
The logic is consistent, but the variables change. The numbers change. Yeah, thank you. That's you said that at the beginning, and now it makes sense. That's brilliant. Okay, so hey, come on now, you're educating the world on LinkedIn. I love this. So now we've got a measurement that we can use, and yes, vendors are obviously going to compare themselves, and there's a little bit of this, that, and the other that happens in that world. That's for customers to go play with. Hopefully. I mean, I say Gartner, whoever, right? Whoever you can, and make decisions and speak with, your engineers and all that kind of jazz. All right. But we do have a measurement. And now that measurement needs to be turned into money so that we can talk with the CFO and the insurance company and whoever leads that relationship and the CISO. And that's where you have really perked up my ears, right? Because it's the first time I've begun to understand. Now we can quantify this in a financial sense. So, okay, I think we've got the foundation that I needed to know. Let me get the big screen little Eddie back on. Let's see here, right there. Okay, so you're going to walk us through this. So the art of data-driven decisions. Number 1. These are your attack, that's your attack vector. All right, walk me through number 1, please.
Sure. It's a little, well, I have it memorized, but it's a little tough probably for the audience to see. I don't know if you can make me smaller.
Okay. I should be able to do that. Hold on a sec. Yeah, I haven't done that before. There I am, flashy with this software. There's another little button I can click right here. Yeah, not on the fly. You people are going to have to talk people through it. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's not that brilliant.
All right, no worries. All right, so there's 3 sections here. The top one, labeled number 1, is variables that I've gotten from other data sources. So this top, and this is specific for an example for phishing, and we could build this out for a variety of other attack vectors as well. But for phishing, the top 3 variables there are from IBM Cost of a Data Breach Report. So the average cost of a breach, per breach, I should say, is $4.91 million. And the frequency of that attack is 17%. So out of all of the attacks that come in, 17% of them are going to be phishing. Right?
Got it, yeah.
That 4th variable is from Checkpoint Research. So the average number of attacks per week, attacks per week per organization is 2,314. So just over 2,300. So 17% of that is 393. Right?
That's brilliant. And then the click probability.
That's from KnowBe4 data. So the probability that after the employee takes cyber awareness training is 18% that they'll click on a phishing link. Prior to that training, it's about 35%.
Oh, well done, Keely. That's right. You measured the employee at their best. That is you've been hard on the right people. That's exactly right. Well done. That's exactly right. On the technologists, we're trying to solve a problem here. And the employees, yeah, exactly. So you're taking an employee at their best and then moving them aside and only measuring the 18%. All right, I'm going to walk people through this real quick. That's super interesting. I do apologize for the slide being low, but hey, good excuse to reach out to both of us over LinkedIn, and we will share this as public information.
Sounds good.
Keely's put all this research together herself, and good for you for nodding your head at IBM and the rest of the gang that worked on us, or really that you gathered this from, but this is you pulling all these threads together. So number 1 in green, the art of a data-driven decisions, right? So the attack vector that Keely's chosen is phishing. You could choose anything. The average cost of a breach is 4.9 million. Okay, so this is already measured from and this is 2022. So this is very recent research, fully measured.
Yes.
Okay, so the average cost of a breach is almost 5 mil. The attack frequency of phishing is 17%. So the number of attacks an organization will get on a weekly basis that is phishing is 2,314 attacks.
Nope, that's the total number of attacks. The 17%.
Oh, that's the total number of attacks. Oh, okay, gotcha. And 17% of those is phishing. Sorry, okay. So real quick, the attack vector is phishing. The cost is 5 million for a breach. There is a 17% chance of the attack being phishing, therefore. So out of 2,300 attacks, that means 393 of those attacks are phishing attacks. So you take the almost 5 mil, and the probability of employees who have been through training, who are at their best, clicking is 18%, and you therefore get this table, right?
Yes.
Beautiful. Wow. Okay, show us the magic. Okay, that is the magic.
Sure.
Already. Yeah.
So I have it up on my screen so I can see it better.
Beautiful. I'm so sorry about that. It's a terrible faux pas.
Oh, no, you're fine.
I don't normally. I'm talking to an engineer, so I don't normally do spreadsheets. You see, you got me on the little details immediately. All right, go on.
So section 2 is just rounded numbers for the sake of the math. It has no correlation to any vendor, any specific solution, or any vendor's stated efficacy or catch rate.
And you're calling it solution price because what you're saying is somebody could buy a next gen, security gateway for 30 grand or for 25 grand or 15. Who cares, right?
Right. So that is inconsequential, and I'll demonstrate why in a second.
Okay.
So section 3 is where we start doing math. So the cost of remaining risk, and I want to make make it clear that this is risk management. This is not dollars in your pocket or dollars directly out of your pocket. It's risk that needs to be accounted for and the business needs to make a decision on. Right. So
how did you get that number cost of, sorry to interrupt you,
Yep.
How did you get the number cost of remaining risk?
Sure.
Perhaps I don't understand
so we
section
know,
2 yet.
Yep. So we know the cost of a breach is $4.91 million. We know the customer is assuming 5% of that. So 5% is $245,500.
Because of number 2. So the risk assumed by the customer. Okay. Sorry, can you walk me through 2? So what we're doing is we're basically saying your investment, which could be 30,000 or 25,000 or 15,000 in any product, right? The efficacy of that product is either 95% great or 90% great, or as you say, sometimes some products are like, their catch rate is terrible. They're only 70%.
Yes.
And so what you're saying then is the customer is assuming the rest of the risk because the catch rate
Absolutely.
by the technology is failing at a certain percentage rate. So somebody has to assume the risk. And from the insurance perspective, the customer's assuming it, right?
Well, yes. From every perspective, with anything, if
right, any perspective. Thank you. You're right, absolutely, because they're going to get hurt, not the vendor, if they get breached. Right. Okay. Thank you.
So sure, no problem. And then the number of events. So we know math. I do this every time I try to explain this. All right. So 5%.
So I was still stuck on cost of remaining breach because that's 5% of 5 million, right? 4.9 mil.
Yes.
Okay. So or 10%, or of course 10% is of course 491. Gotcha. Now I'm on number of phishing attacks. All right. What's What's that for?
All right. So the attacks per week per org 2314 times the frequency 17% times the and you get 20. So
sorry, I'm lost on it.
I'm sorry. So out of see, this is why I always mess up when I explain this one. So 5% of 393.
5% of 3. Why?
Of the phishing
where's
attacks.
The 393 come? Oh, 393.
I'm highlighting it on my screen.
So out of 393 events, 5% of them are not going to be caught.
Correct.
Gotcha,
so they will get through. Okay. So that'll be 20. And we know the click probability from KnowBe4's data is 18% after they have training. So that's 4 will be clicked on. So 4 times 245, because this is per breach. So 4 of those is $869,000 per week.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So that's risk that has to be accounted for either by further mitigation, which they've already been, the users have already been trained, but further mitigation would include having the right security professionals in the right security roles, having MFA, a lot of proactive things beyond the immediate security solution. And the further down this list that you get, like Y is a 90% catch rate. So it's 10% that they're assuming. And I know I've shared this, we're in sales. I'm often in a competitive situation. And when I'm having this kind of conversation, the customers say, oh, well, I'm looking at vendor Y and their $25,000 difference. And what's the big difference of 5%? Well, the big difference is you're assuming $2.6 million of additional risk that you have to do something with.
It's simply elegant. Yeah, that's right. I love it. That's exactly right, Keely. That is the right chart to present to the CFO, for the CISO to talk to the CFO just about their product making decisions for a start. I mean, that's a great, because the CFO skill set and the CEO skill set, unless they're running a tech company, which there's a lot of those today, but that skill set is typically an accounting business, right? MBA type of, right? And this is the conversation a CISO can have with a CFO, right? Is to show this chart. That's really cool. And given that the SEC, so you and I are talking about this, given your interest in law. So this was 2022, wasn't it? Or was it earlier this year? no, it was earlier this year where the SEC said you have to have a cybersecurity skill set represented on your board of a public company now, of course. And this is the conversation I think the board will be having. I think they couldn't care less what vendor is being used, right? I think what they could certainly care about is this. The logo that's behind security vendor XYZ really is immaterial, and likely should be. It should be, on the engineering standards. So
yeah.
All right.
And so I will double down on just verifying the source data, because there are all sorts of reports out there. Everybody proffers that they have this catch rate or that catch rate, but get independent,
well, that's
verification.
beautiful of you. Yeah, that's good of you, Keely. That's good of you. I hear you hedging everywhere on this. That's really awesome of you. And what it tells me is, the maturity of the cybersecurity industry matching that of the insurance industry, which is centuries and centuries old. And that's part of the vernacular problem, right? When we're talking to the CFO, the general counsel, and insurance folks, we are hedging a lot. And our world is a tough one. It's a tough conversation for the CISO to have because, we just there's no guarantee, right? I mean, there's no guarantee anyway, but this one's odd. Yeah.
Yeah. So beyond, and I was smiling earlier when you were doing the intro. So part of the challenge is, how do you account for and ensure human behavior? Because, to quote our good friend Mickey Boland, cybersecurity is a human interest story, and it is. But it's people attacking people to get money. So how do you account for and ensure human behavior? You have to have, good catch rates. You have to have the right tools, the right planning. You have to know what your risk is and plan accordingly.
Right. That's beautiful. Let's end on that because, much of this, I think, is solved through that philosophical discussion. So wonderful. Thank you so much for this work. And Keely can be found on LinkedIn, of course, publicly. So reach out anytime, myself or to Keely, if you want more information on this, because I think this is an effort to help the industry. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Eddie. Thanks, everybody.
Beautiful. Yeah. Okay.